Good evening, everyone. I see that. We have some empty chairs. I'm calling the meeting to order, the County Board Committee of the Whole meeting at 6:30 this evening. Roll call, please.
Here.
Harper.
Here.
Harrison. Hartke.
Here.
Jay.
Here.
Kibler.
Here.
Maxwell.
Here.
McGuire.
Here.
Michaels. Mitchell. Quisenberry.
Here.
Rosales.
Here.
Schrader. Schwartz. Shore. He's here. Weibel. Alex. Anderson. Berkson. Carter. Cowart. Petrie.
Present, and Ms. Schwartz is giving a final this evening, and Mr. Schrader is at his son's concert. A motion to accept the agenda and addendum.
Second.
Mr. Esri, I'm sorry, who did the? Mr. Rosales. Are there any corrections to the agenda? Mr. Alex, are you going to do all of them?
I'll do the ones I remember.
All
I
right.
would like to change the order of finance and policy, so policy comes before finance, and the only exception would be the policy closed session would still be at the end of the agenda.
Okay, so
Due to an emergency in the coroner's family, the auditor's family, we're asking that he be allowed to give his report prior to public participation.
correct. So just a clarification on that policy G will stay at the end of the agenda, and all the rest of policy is being moved before finance. Is everybody clear? Yes, Mr. Quisenberry.
And also in the policy agenda, we are going to take item letter E1 first.
All right, so there have been 3 changes to the agenda. Is everybody clear on those? The auditor, right. Right. Okay, I thought it was just 3. All right, any other changes? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, thank you very much. All right, we are moving to public participation. Minutes, sorry. Yes, I just eliminated the auditor, right? The auditor, if you'll wait a minute while we approve the minutes, I'll accept a motion for approval of the minutes. Mr. Shore and Mr. Kibler, thank you very much. Any changes or adjustments to the minutes? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, thank you. Mr. Farney, please go ahead with your report.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me do this. My wife's been quite ill the last several days. She's been in the hospital. We just got her home, so I look forward to getting back there and keeping things calm around the house. I have the monthly report, that is the standard monthly report that comes off the AS400 system. As you look at it, you'll notice, as you'll also see on the quarterly report, revenues are down because property taxes haven't started coming in. Those numbers will start changing as we all received our bills in the last few weeks. So if anyone has any questions about those reports, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, I'd ask they're accepted and placed on file.
Are there any questions of Mr. Farney? All right, Mr. Farney, your reports are placed on file.
Thank you. The other item that I have for committee action is an interfund loan resolution, which I believe there is also a memo attached to it that you should have all received. This is in response to The annual audit, as performed by our outside auditors last June, one of their findings was that they requested that the board pass a resolution or a policy authorizing inter-fund loan transfers for when there's a negative balance in a fund. This is something that only happens in the preparation of the CAFR. This is not saying that any of these funds overspent what you authorized in their budget. This is, in most cases, a matter of timing. Maybe it's grant funds that are received by granting agencies. In other cases, it's because the budget passed by the county board has created a negative cash balance for the end of the year. In the case of the one large amount, the Tort Immunity Fund, your self-funded insurance fund has always been able to cover that. You've created that intentionally, and so you've always had money to cover these things. This is just on paper. This is really and truly an accounting transaction that the outside auditors would like to have more transparency in. This is the way it's been done for the last 11 years, following GFOA recommendations and GASB number 34. So we would ask that the board pass this resolution authorizing these 4 loans that will take care of things so that we can complete work on the CAFR.
Mr. Alex, would you like to handle this?
I move that this be sent to the full board with a recommendation or approval.
All right. Ms. Bergson? Any discussion or questions for Mr. Farney? All those in,
I'd like to add this
Yes.
resolution passed muster with Ms. Schwartz. I always go to the accounting professor on items like this as well.
thank you for checking with her. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Farney. Appreciate it. Now, we will move to public participation. We have a number of folks who have turned in slips to speak before the county board this evening, so thank each and every one of you for coming and preparing to speak to us. We do have some rules. Some of you are new faces, so let me just review our rules at the county board. Each individual has 5 minutes to talk, and as you see up on the screens, we do have a time clock, so you can check your own time, and we do call it at 5 minutes, and for several reasons. But this evening, we have a number of people, and so I want to make certain that all of you have an opportunity to speak. We do have a time limit of 60 minutes, so if any of you are going to duplicate the thoughts or ideas and you feel you can do it with just one person expressing that for, and you, excuse me, you can name the others that you're representing in those comments, feel free to do that. And Will Kiles asked to go first because he is heading to his role as a City of Champaign council member. So, Mr. Kiles, please.
Good evening. Thank you all for allowing me to speak before this time. Thank you all for allowing me to speak. Before I talk on what I'm going to speak on, which is the PLA agreement, I would like to say that I have a history of working with unions, with my role as a city council member, working on important issues such as Fire Station 4, also working on issues such as the ASME employee issues. And so I have a history of working to ensure that our union employees are taking care of the ones that serve our city, and would continue to like to better and improve that relationship with time. I also, by my father, have done a lot of carpentry work. My dad was a carpenter. He owns a minority-owned business in Chicago area. And so with that being said, I have a history, but also a passion for those who do work for our community, our city, our county, our state, our country. Tonight, I want to talk a little bit about PLA mandates or agreements, and I thought that it was relevant and critical and important for me to be here. I also represent the Champaign County Black Chamber of Commerce, where we have a number of minority contractors who have expressed some issue on this subject matter. Historically, this is not a new debate. This is a debate that's happened over several decades, going back to the 1920s, 1930s. So this isn't a new argument before us, and whether you're pro or against it, the arguments have been spirited. I'd like to propose a couple of questions. I'm familiar with the impact of project labor agreements, and just a couple of questions. The $100,000 threshold is so low that it would knock the majority of non-union groups out of play. Traditionally, these may be minority and female-owned businesses that would not be able successfully to win bids unless they were tied to the union. All of the African-American-owned contracting agencies would be ineligible to bid on county work without joining a union. I have had a couple of our major contractors who could do work, not those who cannot do work, but those who could do work who have expressed issue with this and just could not be here tonight. The thought process is that PLAs would help groups that traditionally have not received a fair share through apprenticeship programs and more access. The argument for PLAs is that it would open up more opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. Who would track these results? What would be the metrics by which these successes were judged by? Who would pay for the apprenticeship training, and who would pay for the cost that the trainee would have to pick up? How would small subcontractors be able to afford to send labor to training and cover their costs at the same time? The PLA conversation has been around for a while. Why haven't groups such as the National Black Chamber of Commerce or the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce endorsed these mandates? If they were for the betterment of minority groups, and these groups are typically, not to be partisan, but Democratic-led or Democrat filled. What happens when more companies than none come back with the comment that they can't find minority contractors or individuals that qualify for apprenticeships? Will the county accept more waivers or letters of good faith efforts? If we want to build minority access to construction jobs, we most likely will have to attract companies to come and create an environment where diversity can happen. It's just not here at this moment in time. And so the companies that are here, the few that are here, would suffer, and then we wouldn't have an opportunity to go out and attract more companies so that we could build capacity, build diversity. Couple more questions. What's been the county's efforts to increase diversity thus far? What have been the results? Have they gone better? How have they gotten better? What is the success rate for PLA mandates achieving their goals as it pertains to diversity, low cost, timelines? I believe these are the critical questions that we have to ask as this discussion continues to move forward. I thank you for your time and look forward to being engaged in this conversation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kiles.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. Langendorf.
My name is Matt Langendorf, and I am the president of the East Central Illinois Building Trades and a regular at these meetings. Back months ago, during one meeting, Board Member Rosales expressed concern that in the county's projects, he would like to see Champaign County residents get the best chance at working on those projects. And that got me thinking about the kind of partnership that could take place between the building trades and the county. What I mean by that partnership is that oftentimes in these meetings, I pick up real frustration from the board members about the results of their projects. What I would like to offer is to be a partner and a liaison between the people building your projects and the board. I would have have many suggestions, such as a 3-week look-ahead, allows Champaign County members to take training at their training facility and be eligible for specialty work like the county does, such as the security fin tube that we installed when I personally worked on the Champaign County Courthouse project. That's not something that Champaign County had any reason to be trained on recently. With the ability to look ahead at that particular issue, we were able to bring in the spec contractor and the project together and get Champaign County's people trained in how to do this. Things like that are available when you work as a partnership, and they are not currently available. What I watched as a field superintendent before I went to work directly for and was elected by my peers at Local 149 was that I went to monthly progress or sometimes even weekly progress meetings, and my role was to protect my contractor from any issues that might be taking place on that job. My role was not to figure out the best way to move forward with the project. My role was not to partner with the people in that room, but it was strictly to represent the needs of my particular employer. That is not a very good way to come up with a successful project. That's not the way to meet budgets and deadlines. What I'm suggesting is what we've implemented at the University of Illinois. For example, the agreement that we customized there recently was that at any time, the end user, the building trades, or the contractor could call a meeting based on an issue they find on a job, and within 1 calendar week, each of the 3 have to send a decision-making representative to that scheduled meeting, and in that meeting, it would be determined how to get this job back on track from wherever it had strayed. These are the kinds of things that I have learned in my time as a building trades president, in my time as the business manager for Local 149. I hail from St. Joe, Illinois. I was born in Urbana, and I have lived in Champaign County all my life. I want the projects in this county, I want them to be successful. My children drive around this community, and I am very proud that they say, my dad worked on that project. I want to be proud of the projects that the building trades does for Champaign County. I appreciate your time today. I am sorry that I'm losing my voice, but I want a partnership between the building trades and this board and the county, and I want things to go better for your projects. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Langendorf. Mr. Crow?
My name is David Crow, 805 East Perkins Road in Urbana. I'm an owner of a commercial general contracting company named TCT Construction. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and offer my opinion. Let me start by saying I am not anti-union by any means. I am against policy that eliminates fair and open competition. Enacting project labor agreements is simply bad policy. We've sent all the board members some talking points, and rather than take time to go through them one by one, I think they're pretty clear, but project labor agreements do not guarantee any level of performance or safety above what could be done in a fair and open market. What they do is limit competition. They keep the 100% of us pay taxes, but less than 40% of the workforce is union, and they would be given the county's work, which obviously is not fair. The agreements like this would directly affect companies like mine and all the many other capable companies like mine that, in that we would simply choose not to bid the work. And the reason is because we would not be able to use the employees that we trust and know that are our current employees. We would be required to be signatory to the Trades Council. I also want a partnership with the county to do work. I should not be excluded from that opportunity by mandates and legislation. And a final point is that this is simply a strategy designed to undermine the governor's initiative to create empowerment zones by creating union-only work zones. I think it's, they've decided to come in on the local level and start working that angle first because they understand that the governor's initiative is to try to help the state solve its budget crisis, solve its the drain on taxpayer funds by opening up bidding to all the available contractors in the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crow. Mr. Allison?
Hi. I'm a union member, and I live in Champaign County my whole life. And over 90% of the work that I've done in the union has been in Champaign County. I just want to talk about the prevailing wage laws, and they tend to discourage the use of out-of-state contractors, since in-state contractors have an increased probability of being awarded contracts for publicly funded construction projects. A comparison of the experiences of states with strong PLWs, all states with PLWs, and states with no PLWs confirms this assessment. Data collected for the 2007 economic census revealed that a median of 93.9% of all construction work was performed by in-state contractors in states with strong PLWs. And that was cited from the Labor Education Program, School of Labor and Employment Relations at University of Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sage?
Hi, my name is Kevin Sage. I live in Champaign County. I'm from Ogden. You guys probably remember Burnham Hospital. That's where I was born. I've lived here all my life. I guess I want to speak in favor of the PLA. You know, I have kids that live here in this county, and I want to make sure that they have jobs as they're growing up. I have one that just graduating from high school, and I want to make sure that there's somewhere for him to go that he can work. A PLA, that's going to keep the work in the local area. It's going to keep the money right here. We talk about we need jobs. This is a way to keep them right here. In response to this gentleman that just spoke up here before me about against the PLAs, it does not restrict any contractor from bidding on the jobs. Not at all. It just levels the playing field where everybody's bidding at the same thing. You're bidding apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So I guess I'd like to urge for you to vote yes to this PLA, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sage. Mr. Chagan?
Good evening. My name is Mark Shagnon. I live in Champaign. I've lived here all my life, and I am serving right now as the district coordinator for the career programs and community partnerships for the Champaign Unit 4 School District. I'm here tonight to speak about the mutually beneficial relationship that we, Champaign Unit 4 Schools, have with the East Central Illinois Building and Construction Trades. For many years, we have operated under a PLA, and the results for our building projects have exceeded our expectations. Our building projects have been completed on time, unless Mother Nature gets in the way, with quality craftsmanship on every project. With the building trades completely vested in this partnership that we have, we see our projects are done on time and almost always completed within budget. We could not be more pleased with our partnership. This valuable partnership is essential as we in Champaign Unit 4 Schools seek to have the best quality schools for our students, our parents, our staff, and administrators. In addition, the building trades have gone above and beyond by being an active participant in offering their assistance with numerous students in our district who are interested in the trades as a career. One such program was the development of a builders club at each of our 3 middle schools. With guidance from the building trades, we were able to develop the program, and with their seed money, we were able to purchase tools and supplies for each of our 3 middle schools to get their programs started. The builders clubs at each middle school are now funded solely by our district, but without the start from the building trades, this may never have happened. The building trades have also been instrumental in assisting me with the rebirth of the industrial technology programs for our high school students. Over the last 15 to 20 years, we've found it important to send all of our kids to 4-year universities, finding out that most of them are now living in the basement of their parents. Their donation of tools, supplies, and equipment, along with their professional guidance, was tremendously helpful as we grew our industrial technology program from 280 students in 2011-2012 to now well over 480 students in our high school, Champaign schools. The industrial technology program has grown from just 1 industrial technology teacher 4 years ago to now 4 teachers, 2 aides and 2 full-time teachers. This past year, we were able to reintroduce welding into our industrial technology program with the assistance of the building trades. And 81 students signed up for welding in Champaign Unit 4 schools, 17 of which were female. We just competed in Peoria with after our first year of welding in a competition for high school students. And our #1 student from Champaign schools in that competition was a female from Champaign Central High School. We truly have a mutually beneficial relationship, and we in Champaign Unit 4 Schools are proud to call the building trades our partner. And I hope you'll think about that as you look at your PLA and what you want to do with that in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shagnon. Next, Mr. Munzo.
Hello, my name is Alonzo Munoz. I'm a laborer out of 703, foreman for the State Farm Center. I just want to let you know that I'm a minority. You know, I started laboring 2 years ago. Probably one of the best things I've ever done in my life. I like it. The apprenticeship, it's great. I learned a lot of safe things. And I think I'm done. Sorry, I'm done.
Thank you very much. Victor Munoz.
Hello, my name is Victor Munoz. Thank you for your time. I am also a laborer for Local 703. My parents, my mother and father both came from Mexico, and we were both born here in the United States. We're first generation American, and we're minorities. I just think being a laborer, as far as working the trades, has been the best thing for me. I have a great career. I have a beautiful family. I have a home in Urbana, and it's solely because I joined the laborers. I make a good living where I could have a family, have a, just live the American dream that we all wanted to live. That's part of the reason why both my mother and father immigrated from Mexico to this country, because they wanted to give us an opportunity to live that dream. And I think it's been the best thing that I could done with my life, and I also speak for my brother. It's been the best thing for him. He followed his big brother's step by being a laborer, and he's doing a really good job. Right now, I'm working at the Natural History Building. We're doing demo work, and it's just great being in the trades, because for one thing is the safety features of being able to go to a job and to be able to feel like if you feel unsafe about something and you can honestly say to somebody, hey, I don't want to do this because I feel unsafe, they will take care of it. Your main thing is you want to go home to your family every day. That is like their top priority, is being a union member, is being in the trades. So I honestly think that the PLA it's a great thing. It's one of those things that it's been a great opportunity for me. It's been a great opportunity for my family, and I just hope you guys look at it that way. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Chase Meisland, did I pronounce that correctly? Meisland, thank you.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Chase Meisland. I'm a resident of Champaign County. I've lived here my whole life. I'm a member of Local 149, and I love what I do. I'm very proud to be a union member. What I'd like to touch on is that prevailing wages do not lead to increases in cost of public construction projects. Total construction costs would not be greatly affected by repeal of Illinois PWL due to potential changes in workforce productivity and management practices associated with the policy change. Repeal of Illinois PWL would likely cost the state money, result in job losses, and reduce construction sector efficiency. That's all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Whit Hines.
Good evening. My name is Whit Heinz. I'm a resident of Champaign, member of Local 149. I'm a plumbing apprentice. What I wanted to touch on tonight was that more construction workers would suffer fatal work-related injuries if Illinois' PWL is repealed. If the prevailing wage to be repealed in Illinois were to be repealed, it is estimated that an additional 7 Illinois construction workers would lose their lives on an annual basis. Over a span of a decade, approximately 70 additional Illinois workers would suffer fatal work-related injuries in the construction industry due to the repeal of the state's PWL. And that comes from an independent study from the University of Illinois Labor Education Program. And I just wanted to thank you for your time this evening. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hines. Mr. Ammons?
All right, good evening, everybody. Aaron Ammons, and it's good to see all y'all again. This is my grandson, Jaleel. Can you say hi? Hi. All right. So, I'm here to speak about the PLAs. I have spoken with Josh and Shayna and Mr. Langendorf, some other folks about this, Mr. Kyles, and I am a union man. I don't have any problem. I'm proud of that. That's something that I know what the university and being in the union has done and has allowed me to do. Okay, could you be cool for a second? You wasted my time, right? And so the concern that I feel like is the elephant in the room most of the time as we address this issue about the participation of minority contractors or African Americans in particular being involved in the workforce or the contracting. As you can see, I've spoke to several folks, but nobody, unfortunately, even spoke to the issue that was raised about minority contracting or African Americans being involved in the actual workforce. Now, I did get some information from Matt about what the apprentice program looks like for the plumbers in 149, that basically the racial demographics for African Americans is about 13%, and the apprentice program is about 11% that they have for local 149. What I'm in the process of getting, and I think Shane is going to help me do this, is get the actual numbers for journeymen and apprentice who are actually, that make up the workforce for all of the trades, the skilled trades in Champaign County. So that we can actually move forward with diversity from a workforce standpoint. And Matt and others have agreed to work with us and work with the Black community on making that happen. But there is a lot of hesitance and a lot of concern from people who have called me saying that, there has to be language or something inside of this PLA agreement that speaks to the opportunities to make sure that African-American contractors or workers will be involved in this PLA. Okay, you gotta cut it out now. Be cool. He's thirsty. So that's one of the concerns that we raised tonight about the PLA. And I think that there's an opportunity to work on it, to create language that would be fair and objective, and to try to achieve some of the goals that we think would be healthy and that would be in the best interest of everybody. So I don't come here tonight to speak for or against the PLA. I just want to raise this issue, and I think that it's important that that an issue be flushed out. And to be very clear, and I've spoken with Matt and others, the makeup of the skilled trades is not something that we made happen. So we are here to continue to try to make that, to bring some diversity to that. But we don't feel comfortable saying, hey, we'll fix that issue on the back end, and we'll try to work in some African Americans or people of color into the workforce after we get this agreement done. That is not something that we are excited about. So we want to see something that is upfront, that is something that is definitely a commitment from the trades to say that we are going to work to bring diversity into our ranks. Now, Matt has given me his commitment. He says that the trades are open to that, and so we're going to do everything that we possibly can to make that happen. But I just wanted to be on the public record saying that there is some concern, and it's a very sensitive situation for me. And you all know that I have a good friend of mine who hangs out in Springfield, who received a lot of support from labor, and we are absolutely understanding what labor means to our success. From a democratic standpoint, even. But I also think that it's important to me, it's sensitive to me. I'm in a position as a union president. I don't want to be speaking out against something that labor is trying to accomplish. I'm absolutely opposed to this turnaround agenda that Governor Rauner is pushing forward. Make no hesitation or no qualms about that. But I just wanted to make sure that my concerns and concerns of many people in the African-American community, contractors and such, was laid out very clearly to the county board as you all consider this. I thank you for your time. Can you say bye-bye? Bye-bye. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Ammons. Is there anybody else who would like to speak this evening? Well, I want to thank everybody for coming and expressing your concerns and comments connected with what we are considering this evening with this resolution. Yes.
I would just like to add something.
Ye- You certainly may, and after you do, if you would, just for the record, fill out one of these.
I have one. Would you like it?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. This is Monica Turando, is that accurate pronunciation?
It's actually Torando.
Turando, thank you.
Yes. I am actually an apprentice with Local 149, plumbers and pipe fitters. I've also been an AFL-CIO delegate. I remember a few faces from the room, Jim and Patsy. I remember when you came and asked us for support. I agree with Mr. Ammons. There needs to be some kind of language in this PLA that lays out and kind of evens the playing field, what demographics you would like on these jobs. I would also like to see this PLA passed because it would also mean these jobs stay local. A lot of my work through this union hall has been in the Champaign County area. I'm not originally from here, but I have seen how this union has helped this community. I'm actually from north of Bloomington, about an hour, and there are no unions there. Those communities have deteriorated because there's no one there to hold their communities together. Their county boards have shattered. There's nothing there. I left, I came to the University of Illinois for an education. My parents were very pro-education, and I'm thankful for it. But the only thing that's keeping me out of their basement, as Mark Chagnon said, is this union hall. I got out of college, I applied at numerous places. The only place that gave me a chance was this union hall. All of these building trades education programs are important. Not everyone's going to go to college. Not everyone's going to be an Elon Musk and create Tesla. There needs to be something else there for these people to fall back on, or this community will start to deteriorate also. I had to move 120 miles from my hometown. I don't get back there much because I'm here working. If I was there, I wouldn't have anything. It is very important to keep these educational programs going, keep these jobs local. I would hate to see this community deteriorate also, but I'm also for leveling the playing field. I'm a minority in this union. Unions do have minorities, believe it or not. It may not meet the demographics one way or the other, but when you get someone from the union, you get somebody who's qualified. When we showed up to apply to this union hall, we had to pass aptitude tests. Anonymously, our names, our demographics were wiped off the pages until we got to the interview process. That was the first time they found out I was white, I was female, what kind of education I had. I took that test and they had blind information going into that. It is not something where they go, oh, you're female, you're in. They took the top people from those tests, put them through this apprenticeship, made them prove themselves throughout this apprenticeship. If you had somebody come into your house, you would want to know they were qualified, right? As the Champaign County Board, when you have a project, you want to know they're qualified. And to me, you get that going through the unions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak this evening? Again, I thank you all for coming this evening, and I will close public participation. Are there any communications from board members this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. We're going to do Justice and Social Services. Ms. Bergson.
Is there a motion to accept these reports and place them on file?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? I guess that does it for justice.
You have no other business or a chair's report. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Quisenberry,
Do we have any future business for justice coming along?
do you want to announce your subcommittee meeting?
The subcommittee meetings are the last Thursday of every month at 5:30, and they are opened. Everyone's welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Quisenberry. I'll try not to take over.
Don't worry. I got this. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to all of you who came out to talk tonight. I appreciate your sharing your ideas, your interests. I apologize in advance. I'm fighting off my second cold of the spring. Made it all the way through winter, not sick a day. Once it turned to spring, 2 colds. So that might make me a little grumpy as well, so fair warning. So first thing we're going to do on the policy agenda is I brought back the strategic planning items that we have been looking at over the last several months. And the reason why I moved it up on the agenda is I wanted to get you while you were fresh. I figured if policy was the last thing we did today and strategic planning was the last thing in policy after our discussion about project labor agreements, we might not be in the most strategic, cooperative frame of mind. So that's why I asked for things to be switched around a little bit and get you while the light is still out, which is a nice thing to see this time of year. So what you have in front of you on the, I believe this is goldenrod sheet in the parlance of office paper colors, is a little exercise that I put together for this evening. You can start reading through it while I give you kind of the outline of what we're going to do. You'll remember that in March, the end of March, we had a study session wherein we worked on our strategic plan initiatives. We put our heads together, we put ideas on sticky notes and big Post-it pads, and then we did some voting to kind of figure out where people's minds were. And last month, it was provided to you as a kind of a review situation. And I asked for further feedback, particularly from those individuals who didn't have the opportunity to sit with us on that March evening. I'm sad to say that although that opportunity was presented, I didn't get any more details, so this should look very familiar. So the 2 things I want to focus on tonight are we had a framework of a strategic plan that we'd been working on with a mission and vision, and those you had actually the previous board had seen, and we had pretty solidified. And then we had a set of 4 goals that we think match up with our county's needs. And the first thing we asked people to do at that session in March was if they had ideas about things that were missing from those top-level goals, those 4 top-level goals, to share them. And this first section, this first table that you see on the first page, include the 3 things, the 3 comments that people shared that evening on that pad about goals as to which goals or which things might be missing. They were an item about our natural resources and how we preserve them and balance our growth here in Champaign County. One that was about our rural transit system, rural transportation system. I think that's rural transportation in general, not just transit. Didn't mean to put words in somebody's mouth there. And then just one word, justice, which did not appear specifically in one of our 4 goals. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do tonight is look at these 3 things. And if you look at the second and the third page, you'll see goals 1 through 4. Sorry, the second page, goals 2, 3, and 4. The first goal is on page 1. If you look at these 3 items, I want you to, in the add question mark box, say yes or no. Is this a component that you feel needs to be worked into one of our goals? or needs to be its own goal. And then the second box is, if you believe it ties into one of our existing goals, you can put the number there. Or you can say if you say, yes, it needs to be a goal, but it doesn't belong in one of the other four, you can say it needs to be its own new goal. So while you're taking a look at that, and filling those boxes in, I'll tell you that what we'll do with this information when we're done tonight, we're going to collect all these, and our small team of strategic planning subcommittee members are going to take a look at this, I believe, next week. Tuesday next week, and we're going to try to make sense out of it. So hopefully, when you fill in your answers, most of you feel similarly, so that we can actually get strong direction from what you share there. So any questions so far about what we're doing here? Mr. Weibel?
Yes. The second item on missing from goals, safe rural transportation system. Are we really saying an effective rural transportation system? We're not really questioning whether we want it safe versus unsafe. So I'm assuming we want an effective rural transportation system.
Yeah, I'm hoping the person that put that on the board in March both is here and remembers that they did that, because it wouldn't hurt to have a little bit of elaboration as to when that was put on there. My recollection was that it was our roads in the rural part of the county need attention.
So we're talking about roads. You're not talking about okay. Well,
I don't think it was specifically about the
providing transportation.
the
for
rural
people.
transit service.
you're
It
talking
was more of a global.
Pavement, et
The
cetera.
pavement needs to be
Okay,
good.
all right.
The bridges need to be good.
Well,
The box culverts need to be.
I will operate on an assumption that it is pavement, et cetera.
Yeah. Does anybody remember sharing that as their goal? I thought it was you, Mr. J. Okay.
Guilty.
Okay. So, and Patsy is suggesting that we call it transportation infrastructure to clarify that. But that was my understanding. It wasn't specifically about rides around the rural area. Other questions about this section? Because this is the easy part. Next part I made a little more complicated. So the next thing I'll talk about, the next part is a prioritization exercise. And just in the simplest terms, we have 5 sections here that have a number of items in them. They're grouped by goals, except for the 5th section is the collection of initiatives that did not get tied to a specific goal, although if you looked at them closely, you could probably make them fit in one place or the other if you wanted to. The goal is in each of these sections, I want our subcommittee to get a sense of the will of the board as far as priority. All of these things came up. They all were things that people felt were important for some reason or another. But if it's going to be a strategic plan for this board, the thing that we're going to put in writing that everybody's going to vote on, it needs to be the top items for most of us, for a majority of us, and I would say, in fact, most of us. So a way to get to that is to ask you in each of these sections to rank these things. And I've made it a little bit flexible in that some of them don't have as many. I've asked that you rank them your top 5 at most. But if you don't like 5 in one of the sections, it's okay to do 3 or 2 or even 1. The other thing that I've put in here is you get 1 veto in each section. So you also get to put an X next to something that you either think is not strategic, is not something we should have in our strategic plan, or don't even think we should do it all, perhaps. That's a way that may be helpful in us when we're looking at things that are kind of close as far as priority support. If there's a strong feeling from a number of people that it shouldn't be there, we can take that into account too. Mr. Weibel?
should your number one project, or number one be number one? Is that how you want it ranked?
Yeah, it can be that way if if the way they do ties on the leaderboard in golf, if you think one's number one and the rest are number two, you can put four number twos if you think they're tied. However, you can sleep tonight, Mr. Weibel.
Thank you. I
I'll
do
accept
have
that.
trouble sleeping, so I appreciate that.
Yes, I'm just giving the basic groundwork for how these exercises pan out. And then as you start looking through this, I'm not saying start putting numbers in now. I'm going to give you a little bit of explanation about how these goals and the initiatives under them, what these things mean. Well, first of all, these are the goals that we used that evening and the language that we used that evening. The items, the initiatives, for the most part, are the items that came up that evening. But you'll see that there is an asterisk and some italics in some of these. Those are the places where I took an existing goal from our existing strategic plan and included it. In some cases, I included it with something that I thought was a discussion item from that evening. For example, replace the county accounting system was one that came up that evening. Our previous strategic plan had the goal of upgrading and maintaining our technology systems, which included accounting. So I lumped that together. I took a liberty there. The ones at the bottom are the ones that I did not find a strong correlation with an existing item we discussed that evening, but felt like they were different enough and still relevant enough that they should be included as a choice for prioritization. And I will also tell you that in each section, we did some voting in that evening to kind of get where people's ideas were. We promised that it was not going to be the final answer kind of vote. But I did use that to order these things. So the things at the top of the list tended to be the things that got the highest number of votes. In some cases, 8 or 9, I think, were the high vote getters. And the ones at the bottom are the ones that got one or two votes. So there is a little bit of method to how they are ordered based on how the participants that evening ranked. I won't say ranked, I'll say voted. We did dot voting. Those were the things that got the most interest from the dot voting. So there are several pages here. One other thing I would suggest is, as we're looking through this, we did a little bit of work in that evening to talk about what these things mean. There's probably still some ambiguity, as Pius pointed out with the safe rural transportation system. I intended to have some time as we looked at this for people to, one, ask questions about what any of these things mean so that we could make sure we agree on it. And two, if somebody has something on here that they feel particularly strongly about, I'd be happy to recognize you and let you speak a moment to advocate for a particular item as being why you think it's important, why you think it's strategic for the county. But in the meantime, while I don't see any hands up at the moment, was that a hand going up, Astrid? Okay, use your microphone, please.
You have the, where the. Where are you? No. Second page, but it wasn't on the first. The adult assessment center, you have twice, so you're going to split the votes.
Yes, there is some. I have to admit, this system is not perfect. There are 2 or 3 things that appeared in multiple places because people felt they belonged in different locations. What that means is, if you like the adult assessment center, you can rank it once in 2 different places. So I suggest gaming the system in that case. Once you find it. No, trust the subcommittee, or at least trust the other people on the subcommittee to help me figure out where where the things should be aggregated. Right, and, that may give a little more texture, in one section, you may rank it higher, in another section, you may rank it lower. There's only a few circumstances like that, and I think we can live with it and manage that. Mr. Weibel?
Another question for you. Sorry about that.
I know you weren't there, so I figured you'd have a lot of questions.
I was out of town, I believe. Goal 4,
Goal 4.
it says more intergovernmental cooperation for areas outside municipal boundaries for maintenance. I'm not sure what for maintenance means. Apparently,
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Shore is the
Shore.
guilty person.
Please use your microphone, Mr. Shore.
Gladly. That was just an interpretation of something that I had brought up just with regards to issues like the Carroll edition and just needing to figure out how we're going to deal with that, where things have some township oversight and just different areas of government
Okay.
overlapping.
Okay, Mr. Rosales.
Do you have to use all 5 choices in each category?
No, like I said, if you only have 3 in a particular category that you like, you can only number 3. Because some of them only have a few, and you may not have anything. You might only use your X in one category if you don't like that particular goal. Yes, Mr. Kibler.
I'm missing a word. In goal 4, number 1, explore alternative sources of revenue, facility maintenance, and new construction projects, endeavors, new anything?
New facilities. We're going to write in new facilities. Yes, I just cut and pasted here. Yes, Mr. Hartke.
Do you have a due date for our homework?
I was hoping you guys would be working on it while I was talking.
Okay, very good.
But
I consider that a due date.
If people feel like they need time, I would take it by the end of the week, but we need it by Tuesday because we're going to use it. And that's why it's a fairly simple prioritization system. And other parts of the meeting aren't always as engrossing as strategic planning, so you could fill it in as time goes on. Mr. Alex says the Finance Committee meeting will be riveting, so not then. What am I missing, Ms. Petrie? I'm missing a lot.
In our packet on the last page, the last line is use current JDC for adults. And am I missing that on the last page of the golden document?
No.
Renovation of downtown jail and reuse for JDC for adults under goal 2. If it appeared in both places, it was a cutting and pasting error
Okay.
of mine that
Thank
it did
you for
not
the
appear in both
clarification.
places. If you'd like to vote for it in both places, please go ahead. Always have a firm outline and then flexible interpretation in something like this. You can collect that side because you're going to have to be looking at them, Mr. Harper. Yeah, if you want to work on these as we go through the evening, I just want to collect them, me or Stan or Geraldo or Mr. Kibler, I think, is also on that committee, right?
No, if you give them to him, they'll be in Warsaw.
Okay, yeah, give them to Mr. Harper. He always comes to my meetings. I appreciate it. Oh, actually, there's a better offer. Ms. Busey said they'll compile the results if we give them to her. That sounds like a good deal. I appreciate that, Ms. Busey. All right. Yes, Mr. Kibler.
I hate to, I don't know if this is calling out or whatnot, but when we had the discussion at the meeting, one of the items that I wanted to get added to it, and it's not here, is a zero-based budget every 10 years.
Okay.
So that way we know, we build from the ground up where our budget truly is.
So at the bottom of each one of these things, there's a place for you to add notes. So I would assume that the zero-based budget is, which one does that fit under?
Probably goal.
Goal
is
one?
The transparency piece,
Yeah, so Mr. Kibler is advocating for a zero-based budget
once every 10 years.
once every 10 years. So that means don't always, year to year, continue to start from what you did last year. Start from scratch every 10 years at least. And so if that is appealing to you, please add that to the notes, since it's probably my fault that it's not on the list. Because we did talk about that, right? That's my fault. I do like that idea. I didn't leave it off on purpose.
Okay.
Mr. Maxwell.
Microphone.
It's not working right now. There's a new one coming. I've tried, but yeah, you can try too.
Thank you, Mr. James Carter, for the suggestion on zero-based budget. President Carter.
I have to admit, that was before I was paying attention to politics, Mr. Maxwell. Can't say that.
Okay.
I'm going to have to look it up now, though. You can trust me on that. Okay, so unless anybody has any more questions about how we're doing this and what we're doing with this, I'm going to move on and actually get to our work here. Everybody ready? Okay. So, policy, personnel, and appointments, item A1. This would be for the Board of Review, a term from June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2017. Madam Chairman, do you have an appointment to make?
Yes, I nominate Diane Hayes.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Kibler. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That passes unanimously. Also, for the Farmland Assessment Review Committee, term,
Go ahead. Sorry.
a term of June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2019. Ms. Petrie.
Yes, I nominate our former colleague, Steve Mosier.
Seconded by Mr. Esri. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. I was hoping Steve would be here tonight. I was looking forward to that.
Yes.
Next, I would entertain an omnibus motion for these water districts, and I will list them here, and then I'll let Ms. Petrie give us who she's appointing. That would be the Sangamon Valley Public Water District, a term of June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2020. Penfield Water District, a term of June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2020. The Dewey Community Public Water District, 2 terms from June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2020. Another Dewey Community Public Water District, term of June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2019. And then finally, a Dewey Community Public Water District, a term of June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2017. Ms. Petrie.
Yes, before I announce the nominations, if you are wondering about the, what seems inconsistent in the dates for the Dewey Water District, reminder to county board members who were on the board before, this term. We are adjusting some errors that existed in the previous terms, so that's why they're not all going out the 5 years to 2020, okay? So for Sangamon Valley, I nominate Frank Howard. Penfield Water, Michael Tryon. Dewey, Mr. and Mrs. Holzhauer. Dewey, David Hudson, and Dewey, Thomas Zindars.
Diane seconds. Any discussion or questions? Yes, Mr. Maxwell.
I'm going to be very happy to support all these nominees, but I am particularly happy about supporting Elaine Holzhauer, who happens to be a grade school and high school classmate of mine.
Thank you. So, any other comments or old high school buddies? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Those pass unanimously. Finally, our last appointment for the Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District, a term for a Republican on this board that we have to maintain balance on, of June 1st, 2015 through May 31st, 2018. Ms. Petrie.
Yes, I nominate Jerry Like.
Second by Mr. Jay. Any discussion or questions? We believe this is a three-person board with 2 Democrats and 1 Republican.
Yes, and 1 Democrat lives in Urbana, 1 Democrat lives in Champaign, and Mr. Like lives in Champaign, trying to keep the balance.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, say nay. That passes unanimously. Next, you have in your packet the county clerk's April 2015 report. Mr. Holton is here to answer questions for this and the following items. So does anybody have any questions for Mr. Holton? Seeing none, I will accept that report and place it on file. The next item is a request for evaluation of the position of Senior Vital Records Clerk by the Job Content Evaluation Committee. This is a request to send this currently vacant due to retirement position for a review, since the job description has not been changed for approximately 11 years, I believe. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Holton? I'll take a motion first, I guess. So moved. Thank you, Mr. Kibler. Mr. Shore seconds. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. That goes straight to the Job Content Evaluation Committee, and we will hear back from them if there are any changes to be made. Next, you also have the Administrative Services April 2015 report. Any questions for Ms. Busey? Otherwise, I will accept it and place it on file. The next, you have a memo about a couple of ADA compliance requirements that the administration is recommending that we take. Can I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Esri, seconded by Mr. Maxwell. Deb, would you like to give us any additional guidance on that?
These are requirements as we move forward with the settlement agreement, which we expect you will have at your June meeting. We just wanted to take care of some of these things ahead of time to ensure that the county board's aware of them and that they will be included in the settlement agreement, and also to be able to tell the Department of Justice that we are actively moving forward in compliance as required by the Department of Justice. So this includes a notice under the Americans with Disabilities Act, a grievance procedure, and designation of ADA coordinators for the county. Those are the 3 documents that we're asking for your approval on.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. That passes unanimously. Next, you have a marked up version of the personnel policy that updates the policy to make it more compliant with the ADA audit that we had. Can I have a motion to make those changes? Mr. Shore? Mr. Hartke seconds. If I can keep up here. All right, and it looks like, I read through the changes, they look pretty straightforward, mostly about adding our accommodation requirements. Are there any other details worth calling out?
The big issue here, you amended most of the personnel policy last month for the other requirements under ADA, but the reasonable accommodation policy hadn't been fully developed, and it's in here now.
All right, thank you. Any questions or discussion? Yes, Mr. J.
Where are we, Deb, in this ADA thing? Are we winding down, or are we?
Yeah, I believe we had our last conference call today, bringing in department heads and looking at all of the requirements, and we have reached agreement on what we believe is a settlement agreement that we can present to you and represents all the information that we could provide to them to amend the settlement agreement to ensure that it acknowledges where we are today and that we're acknowledging what the requirements are, that where we have to become in compliance with the law. So I fully expect the settlement agreement to come to policy at the June meeting.
All right, thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. That passed unanimously. Okay, now we are at other business. We had in our packet a proposed resolution adopting the Local Economic Growth Initiative tripartite. I would like to have a discussion of this item tonight. I know there's a number of people who have insights, ideas, and some concerns about this proposal. Only 2 or 3 hours ago, we got a response from Barb Mann in the Civil Division of State's Attorney's Office, responding to a query that Deb put to her after we had our agenda planning meeting for this section. I believe Barb brings up several items, but the most important thing that comes out of Barb's letter is I think she's asking for more time to investigate the implications of this and be able to advise us fully. So on the basis of that, I would like to have a discussion. I would like to hear people's concerns and ideas with regard to this, but I think we're going to have to give the state's attorney more time to give us feedback and maybe rework some of the components of either the resolution or the baseline, the template agreement to address those in the long term. So I don't, I know Robert's Rules calls for there to be a motion on the floor for discussion to occur, but this is a committee meeting. I'd like to go straight into discussion. Mr. Weibel?
Well, I would move that we defer this item to next month, but we allow discussion at this meeting.
Okay, that's what I'd like to do too. And I would like, Ms. Bergson has seconded that, since you have wide powers from the chair until somebody appeals the decision of the chair, I'm going to let us discuss under that motion, after which we'll vote, which I assume we're going to vote to defer it. So we're only discussing the motion to defer, but I'm going to allow commentary on the actual content during that time period. And you can tell me that's out of order as many times as you want, but until there's a successful appeal of the motion of the chair, it won't matter. Mr. Maxwell?
I move to amend the resolution and drop the portion concerning discussion and just defer. So that would be my
Point of
motion.
order.
Mr. Weibel?
Point of order, you can only have one motion on the floor at a time. amendment, how can you amend?
So, Mr.
what-
Maxwell, is your intent to not allow discussion of this evening? That would be correct. Okay.
Then this motion should really be to.
You would be calling the question at that point,
Yeah. Well,
rather than amending.
I think we should vote on the deferral.
Well, no, I think he could call a question on the deferral,
Okay.
and
Right,
if it
right.
fails, we can continue to discuss.
Okay.
So, Mr. Maxwell has asked that we call the question and vote on the deferral immediately and not have a conversation about this. And so, if we have a vote right now, and I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. If you vote yes, we proceed with we would call the vote on deferral. If you vote no, we can continue to have a discussion about this and find out what people think. The chair can call for a roll call at its prerogative. That's what we're voting on, yes. Yes, to make this clear, we're voting on the calling of the question, which would then lead to a vote on deferral, and then we would stop talking about this. If the call of the question fails, we'll continue to talk about this. Roll call, please.
Esri? No. Harper? Yes. Harrison? No. Hartke?
No.
Jay? Kibler?
Yes.
Maxwell? Yes. McGuire? No. Michaels? Yes. Petrie?
No.
Rosales? Yes. Shore? No. Weibel? No. Alex? No. Anderson? Yes. Bergson? No. Carter?
No.
Cowart?
No.
Quisenberry?
No. So we're going to continue to discuss the deferral by discussing the item. All right, I would entertain any comments from the board on this item. Comments or concerns? Mr. Alex?
Yeah, I'll throw out a few once I get my microphone to work. I am obviously wholeheartedly in support of this being deferred. It's pretty clear it's not in a final form at this point, and the issues that Ms. Mann raises are all, I think, apropos. So clearly more time is needed to look at this. But just a couple of comments based on what I've seen so far. To put this into context, Champaign County, I don't know if everybody knows this or not, but just to get it out there, Champaign does have a responsible bidder ordinance. It's Ordinance 666. And that ordinance does include a prevailing wage requirement. It does include that to be considered a responsive bidder for a county contract. You abide by that prevailing wage requirement, and you are participating in a Department of Labor approved apprenticeship program. So we could talk about, we've heard comments about the state, the future of the state prevailing wage law. Of course, we never know what that's going to be. But Champaign County, in effect, has one of our own. Yes, Mr. Quisenberry?
Please add the amount of the bids that are covered by it.
I'm sorry, I believe it's
$25,000.
bids in excess of $25,000.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So the reality is the vast majority of work that is done on Champaign County contracts is done by union labor. All work that is done by on Champaign County contracts, whether it involves local, state, or federal funding, is being done by workers who are being paid scale wages. And as I said, the vast majority of that's being done by union-affiliated contractors. There are also prevailing wage requirements currently, as we know, at the federal and state levels. So on some of the highway contracts, things like that, that are funded by federal and state money, that also applies. It seems pretty clear that there are a lot of positives to the owner of a project to be working under a project labor agreement. It eliminates the possibility of work stoppages, provides mechanisms to resolve disputes among different crafts, disputes between essentially the owner and the contractors. So in that regard, I mean, comments that people have made about Champaign County not having a great track record in the success of construction projects, I think are on point. If this is something that the board feels can help streamline and improve the efficiency of construction projects, it's absolutely something I'm willing to consider. To be fair, most of the problems that we have had with construction projects in Champaign County appear to be the result of design and oversight issues rather than labor issues. Buildings tend not to have problems if they are designed well to begin with, and I think we have a number of buildings that were not designed very well, or as a result of circumstances beyond our control, such as the case of the nursing home where steel studs were unavailable because of Hurricane Katrina. I mean, we've had some unfortunate last-minute construction changes which have resulted in less than optimal projects through no fault of the laborers who are working on those projects. I agree that the $100,000 threshold seems kind of low. I mean, as we know, $100,000 doesn't buy you very much. The county does a fair number of $100,000 projects, most of which are generally done by the employees of a contractor, most of which typically involve a very limited number of crafts, you know, replacing of a piece of equipment, repair of some part of a building. So I would certainly be willing to hear arguments for or against increasing that threshold, because I think the intent is that this really cover major projects, and I'm not sure $100,000 is a major project anymore. As I said, you know, State's Attorney's Office has raised a number of issues. We need to look at those. There may be some issues on the highway side with something like this, because virtually all the highway projects we do include state and federal money. So I think, and this is something that the State's Attorney's Office will have to look at, I think that a PLA that applied to one of those projects would actually have to go up to the state or the federal level to be approved for use in a project. So that's a question. I don't know if that's the case or not. That's something that that the county engineer, Jeff Blue, thought we needed to look into, because obviously with the tight timelines for bidding these projects, we want to make sure that we're not adding something. I think the county could negotiate with a contractor in reasonably timely fashion, but I have no idea whether the state or the feds would be able to do that. We wouldn't want to build something in where we're losing, you know, 30 or 90 days of construction season waiting for somebody in Washington to sign something. There are some very specific provisions in the proposed PLA, and I know this is not in its final form, but one of them is about work hours. And I would be concerned that while it might be fine for some projects, we may also have some projects. We've done work at the courthouse where we've had people had to work on weekends to be there when the judges aren't there. I'm not aware of the county having done any night highway work, but certainly the cities of Champaign and Urbana have when they're working on major intersections or major streets. So I think there are going to be issues that are unique to each project that probably a PLA would have to be flexible enough to allow us to work out on a per project basis. And I guess above all, my biggest concern is just, I think everybody needs to understand exactly what it is that the agreement says. You know, how does this interact with the ordinance 6666, which already requires prevailing wage? There have been comments that this does preference union labor, it doesn't preference union labor. Non-union contractors still bid, union contractors. I mean, these are decisions that I feel like we can make, but I want to make sure that everybody understands what it is that they're voting on before we're asked to vote on it. And then finally, I mean, Alderman Ammons and Ms. Tarando both raised the issue of minority participation, and I think the notion of getting it in writing there is very apropos. I agree with their concern that this is probably something that if the county board decides is appropriate to try to address in a labor agreement, that we do it ahead of time rather than after the fact. So I'm not opposed to the idea. I think there's indication out there that PLAs do a lot of good. I think the big knock against PLAs is that they increase costs relative to the use of labor that is not paying union scale. But since we're operating in a responsible bidder environment anyway, you know, we're going to be paying the same labor rate whether it's done under a PLA or whether it's not. So I think there's a lot here that has to be answered. I just want to make sure these issues get on the table, and I'll just sit back and listen and hope that we continue to discuss this.
All right, Ms. Berkson.
The courts won't let us favor local labor, and I am tired of contractors coming in here with their labor crews and building things, and everybody leaves. And if this is a legal way to keep the jobs local, I think that that would be a very good idea. I do think the 200,000 is way too low, and probably there should be some provision about minority-owned. But I think saving some jobs for the locals is a very good idea.
Thank you, Ms. Bergson. Yes, Lloyd. Mr. Carter.
Okay. I'm glad we're going to have a chance to digest this further. And I'm going to tell you, as an American, that's all I know. I don't have no over-the-water concern or nowhere that I can claim. This is all I got is America. And when we come to the judicial system in our country, it's the most compromised bunch of crap I ever heard. I haven't seen a law yet we got on the book that can't be compromised. And it's sad. Now, some of us sitting up here to my fairness didn't even want us to have the chance to go further and look into this because they need this. We've been fast-tracking over folks so long in this country till we just done got used to that. We just done got to whoop, 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 go on, yeah, man. Then went down the road that bites you, then that's the only time you get concerned about something. And I'm very glad that votes turn out what we're going to digest this more. And I'm going to tell you, like, yeah, we let the people, local folks, had the contracts here because that's what we thought was more fruitful. That wasn't so. The very old homeboys got us. Now, I'm saying this, that it go both ways, that we need to sit down and look at this. Unions, yeah, I'm a union man, pure union man. There's too many people that got their head busted to try to get union. But they need to fess up too. They is not all Christian when it comes to, when I was a kid here, the most people you had doing highway work was black folks. You hear me? That's what you had out there. Now, when the money, they used them until they got around to get the labor up, where it's good money, they started to fade those guys out. I remember going up and down highway and see 35 black men out there on the highway. Now, what do you see you all? How many guys you tell me is working in the trade out there on Illinois state highways? Be honest. Almost zero. You might see two. You go back the next day, one of them gone. They've been shipped off somewhere. It ain't a president born in me, but replaced with a female. Talking about justice, folks, we need to sit down and start being honest with each other, because ain't nobody going nowhere. We all got to live here until God come and take it away. So we got to try to live together. And I'm a pure union man, and you know who used to be some of my worst enemies? The contractors that I was paying my dues with were right in the union with me. I give a bid, thought I have the bid, and when I know one of my brothers done whooped me out. Same union, same union. And this can be documented. I ain't telling you nothing that is not factual. This is the pure truth. Now, since the money got up where you can make $40 or $50 an hour out there, especially on Saturday, a black man can't touch it. And they don't even recruit them anymore. Now, the jailhouse system is one of the main objective of getting the black young men out of trade. The jailhouse system. And that's why I want to know, I never vote for another jailhouse. Because it doesn't do anything but erode your community when it comes to blacks. And unfairness. And that's a problem. We can spend $36,000 in-house an inmate and pay $6,000 and something to.
Mr. Carter, could you bring it back to the project labor agreement?
I know it's going when, I'm gonna cut this off, I'm sorry, but I just
Okay.
got carried away with the stuff I heard around here about trying to fast track this thing, and we need to talk about it.
Well, we're going to slow track it.
So I'm gonna stop and, try to be at the next meeting.
All right, thank you. Ms. Michaels, you're next.
Thank you. I do agree with several of the things that have been said here tonight, but then there are other things that I would like to bring to light. I think every one of us in here know of what we might call small contractors compared to the unions, because they do have a lot of people working for them. But honestly, those small contractors are local. They're as local as they come. They stay here. They work hard. And yes, they pay prevailing wage because that's part of the contract, and that's okay. That's okay. But I really take a bit of offense when you have in here that union workers are more skilled than non-union workers. And that is a line item in there that I have a problem with. You see, I live with a contractor, and I've known several contractors that some of their crew is union, some is not. And that's okay. But I do feel like we need to be very careful, and as long as the money's the same and everybody's abiding by the same rules, then why can't the little guy bid on something just the same as the big guy can? Or why can't he be a sub to the big guy as long as he's paying that same kind of a wage? So I'm glad this is being looked at again. I'm glad that we're trying to work together as a group to do things, because I think there's good for everybody here. Minority, yes, color is a minority, but female is a minority, and a small business is also a minority in our community with this project. So I'd like that to be recognized, please. Sorry, a little passionate here.
No, thank you, Ms. Michaels, for your contribution. Next up, I have Mr. Kibler and then Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I first read this, I was confused, and so for me to even consider supporting it, I will need someone in this board who understands this a lot better than I to explain it to me, probably either in this session or afterwards. First and foremost, what's the catalyst for this? Mr. Langendorf came and gave a very open arms discussion about, I will be here to help you get through your issues. Mr. Alex rightly then identified that the issues we've been experiencing with our current buildings did not relate to the workforce that was building the building. It was more in the planning side. So if we plan to adjust the overall process by which we hire people and start excluding those that are not part of a group, then we have a pretty good, and I hear the laughter, but at the end of the day, we have to be able to explain to whoever wants to work on a Champaign County building why we've excluded them. What's the purpose for the exclusion? I spoke with a number of people over the weekend who called me, who were very concerned about why this is being put in place, especially since they have guys here that are part of independent unions or are not part of unions at all. He or she can't force their workers to sign the card with another union. It cannot be forced. So the person who has a steady workforce, who they've known for years and has been part of their group for years, he can't force them to do something they don't want to do in order to sustain or get a bid, or not get a bid, but get a contract from Champaign County. That impacts him, it impacts his family, and these guys are local. I completely appreciate the local element to this. It's 100%. I wish there was a way we could better do it. As you noticed by the Supreme Court ruling, it's a little bit more difficult to do. But in the end, I'm not saying that this is not the right approach. I'm saying, what's the catalyst? What is it, what are we really trying to achieve by doing this? And I've not heard it yet. The second thing is ultimately how I read this, and this is where I'll need correction as well. A group must hire individuals or workers that come from the East Central Illinois Building and Construction Trades Council. Must be part of one of the organizations that belong to the council. If I'm incorrect in that, I would love to be clarified on it, which goes to my prior point of who's in what union or who's in what group, and are they forced to move over? The other key pieces which have been hit on very accurately tonight is minority hiring and small businesses in general. And one piece that I found really interesting from public participation tonight, which I really want to hit on more, and I want to learn more from you guys on, is the leveling of the playing field. And this is probably just because of my lack of experience, but the playing field from my vantage point almost appears to be more emphasis on union labor than not. And so it seems from the discussion tonight that those in the local unions feel that the playing field is against them, or the deck is stacked against them, which is contradictory to what I've known. I've not been part of the building trades, and my family is not part of the building trades, but they are part of teachers' unions and whatnot. So it's probably it's all about me not understanding. So if you can provide more clarity as to what is being leveled in this playing field by this agreement, that would also be very helpful for me. So thank you for the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kibler. Ms. Harrison.
So definitely would like to talk to the catalyst and goals aspect that Mr. Kibler just brought up. We have spent hours talking about some of the past projects that the county has done that we've had issues, from design flaws to locations of where some of the buildings were built, that have led to further cost incurred by the county. And so the goal of the tripartite is to address those types of issues that could have been caught earlier on in the process if we had a partnership with the contractors, trades, and the county to discuss what was going on and to really make sure that we're all on the same page and we're talking about ways to make sure that the county's getting the best bang for their buck, making sure that the county is being responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars by ensuring that we are all working together and having a process that will be open and able to address the concerns we may have. I'm just even thinking of some of the projects that we've recently have talked about with like the boilers at the nursing home, with the intake being in the laundry room, and how that's taken down a boiler. And I mean, that's something that if could have been caught and taken up to a general foreman who could take it to then the contractors and the architects. I mean, that was a design that could have hopefully been caught before it all began when they were going over the job specs at a pre-job meeting. So that's kind of the catalyst and processes behind where this is coming from. I do think there are a lot of points that have been brought up that need to be addressed. Minority hiring, small contractors, wanting to make sure that everyone's involved in the process. And I think we're all making strides towards achieving those goals, but continuing the dialogue to ensure that we are all working together to figure out ways to make sure that Champaign County is being a leader on this front. I think we have a real opportunity to bring everyone in and really try to find ways to move forward instead of just throwing our hands up being like, well, we've always had this problem, but not actually taking an action step to make change. We've talked a lot about past problems, but we're not really setting a groundwork for correcting those problems as we move forward. So this is a type of agreement that we could put together to ensure that the county is protecting taxpayer dollars on our projects and that we are looking out for the county's best interest.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Maxwell. Sorry if I missed you earlier, Gary.
Oh, that's fine. Giving this some thought, and I was impressed with the young lady from the Plumbers Union, and I would like to say that 65 years ago, and you're going to hate this because I'm an old guy, but 65 years ago, my father moved his 10 children to Champaign County for one reason. It wasn't because he was a union carpenter. It wasn't because he particularly liked the place, although he learned to love it. It was because of the economic engine that this place drove. It's what makes unions possible in this area and thrive. It's what makes you have a job, allows you to have a job. It's why Southern Illinois is dying. There is no economic engine going down there. That's why the area north of Bloomington's dying. So one of the problems I have with this agreement is that it does not create one new job in the private sector. Secondly, it will impose additional burdens and uncertainty on our staff. And lastly, it will conflict with previously passed Ordinance 6666. I would like to see, as partner, truly I would, I'd like to see all of us work together for one thing, and that's to bring more opportunity and more jobs to the people of this county. Then your unions will thrive, and everybody else will too. So I'm holding out my hand and saying I would like to work with you to generate more jobs for this community. Now, PLOs, first of all, I'm a believer if something isn't broke, don't try to fix it. Champaign County has built many projects in recent years without legit. In this case, it means project labor agreements. Our problems with these projects has not been labor. And I will say that. Labor's done a good job. Our problems have been with the design, and our problems have been with the construction oversight. Now, this agreement would require us to have agreement on everything over $100,000. Now, PLAs have been around for a while. Opinions vary upon their usefulness. It can't be proved that PLAs lead to safer, better constructed, and more economical projects. In fact, some maintain that PLAs drive up the cost and by stifling competition. It has been stated that U of I and others use PLAs. It makes perfect sense to use a PLA for a project like a assembly hall, and I'm not going to call it the State Farm Center. I'm old enough that I helped pay for it when it was the assembly hall with student fees. So I will continue to call it the assembly hall, thank you. I expect the U of I will probably begin to curtail PLAs. Now, within the last 2 weeks, the Illinois Tollway has done away with PLAs. It's been maintained by Governor Ronner that PLAs have driven up the cost of the tollway $1 billion since 2005 and drive up project cost 20%. I doubt if he can prove that. No more than I doubt if you can prove some of the things that you said in a positive manner about them tonight. The one thing we have to remember is we can do a PLA anytime we want to. We don't have to have this blanket resolution, and it may make perfect sense to enter into a PLA for a specific project. The Illinois Department of Transportation does enter into PLAs on a project-by-project basis. We don't need a blanket resolution. We can enter into a PLA when it makes perfectly good sense, and it may for a jail project. So this broad omnibus measure is not really necessary. Recently, we just had a $100,000 estimated cost replacement of 5 hot water heaters at the nursing home. The project came in a little bit under $100,000, $98,000. But it's a really timely project, and it's a good example of how this would have affected us. And I've talked to both our administrator as well as our facilities director. Both believe it would have added additional burdens to our staff to insert those provisions, and both believe it would have driven up the cost of this project because of the fact we would have stifled some bidders on the job. So why would we want to impose such a burden and cost upon our staff and on the people of this county for these things? So at least we ought to consider raising the limit considerably. And again, in closing, I'm going to, again, say, let's work together. Let's try to generate some economic development and try to bring more jobs into the area so the pie gets larger. What I'm afraid this PLA omnibus bill is doing is basically trying to guarantee a piece of the pie for one sector, one group. And really, the pie's too small to begin with. So let's work together and make it bigger so that there's more opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. I have Mr. Hartke next, and then Mr. Jay, and then Mr. Weibel.
It has been noted tonight that in virtually every construction project the county has done, we use union labor. So the idea that not passing this is going to save us money, I think, is a farce, because we're going to use union labor regardless, and I think that that's a good thing. To me, what this does is it brings labor to the table from the beginning of the project. It gives them a greater ownership as stakeholders in countywide projects. I think that's an important thing because they represent taxpayers as well as union members. As far as the minority issue goes, I have a lot of the same concerns that have been mentioned, but I tend to be more concerned about minority union workers over minority business owners. I think there are a lot more in my community that are working for unions rather than are creating non-union businesses. I think we also have to address the greater economic issues of being supportive of union in our community. When we talk about increasing our revenues, rather than raising tax rates, you can raise incomes and get incomes up so people can buy more things, can pay more sales tax, can pay more property tax, and we can work on our budget. That comes from the idea of supporting workers as a primary stakeholder in these kinds of projects. I think that, and I've heard a lot of concern about minorities tonight, and that's something I'm very happy to hear. I hope we continue to hear those concerns when other issues come before this board besides just a union issue.
Thank you, Mr. Hartke. Mr. Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got just a few items of clarification that I feel necessary to relate to the rest of the view here tonight. I happen to truly believe that labor agreements are actually a bad public policy from my own standpoint. But having said that, I think that we need to look at the whole picture and not part of it, and not listen to all of the flowery speech that was in that resolution that made it sound like it was a walk through the garden. And I think we also need to keep in mind that there's 60% of the labor force are not union people, and they need jobs also, and this doesn't address them, of course. So I think we need to keep the whole thing in context to the best of our ability. It's been said and alluded to that union workforce is a safer work environment. That just isn't factual. In fact, I think we could find that OSHA statistics indicate that the average non-union workers experience fewer construction worksite fatalities when compared to their union comrades. I'm not saying that to start a friction, but it's just a fact that's not being said that's true. The other thing that I think that we forget about is whether we like it or not, as we put this noose around the working man and the business owner, the contractor, we put a tighter noose around his neck and give him less room to operate, because we're turning part of it over to this labor agreement. And I think that will live to haunt us in time. It's easy to get started down this road. It's almost impossible to get out of it. So I think, again, I don't see where this is in the best interest of Champaign County. I would say that, and I made this statement, as I'm sure some of you already know, that most of our buildings have been built under union leadership and construction. And have we had some problems? You betcha. And I don't think a labor agreement would have fixed those problems that we had. They were not always necessary. In fact, some of them were pretty stupid, but they happened. And this agreement isn't going to fix that. The other thing that nobody wants to talk about is that usually the more tighter we put the rein on the people, the more it's going to cost us to get the job done. This isn't going to be cheaper. It's going to cost us more money. And we're going to be able to have less oversight of our own, on our own project. The budget it's been a proven study that, in fact, PLAs usually increase final construction's cost because they're paying more, and they got more loops and holes to jump through. And it's also been said here in this room even that union laborers are better and safer employees. That's just ridiculous. That is absolutely not true, and that can't be qualified. The other thing that was mentioned as if you sign up with this agreement, there won't be any work stoppages. In recent years, a number of PLA projects in Illinois have saw labor stoppages. So that's another farce. We're not being told the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We're being told what a few want us to hear. And just for reference, I would point out that Champaign County has completed 9 major construction projects over the last 20 years for a total of over $70 million. None of those projects was ever suffered a work stoppage, slowdown, or strike, and all the projects were completed with union labor. And another item that Chris alluded to, and it come to my attention tonight in caucus, is this particular contract doesn't give us much lead room in the ability to adjust hours. It's absolutely imperative that the administration of this county has the ability to change hours if it needs to be changed, and it shouldn't be stopped by a labor contract. So I just think this is a farce. I wish we didn't have to go through this. I don't think a labor agreement is going to do the county one bit of good and may, in fact, do some harm. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jay. Mr. Weibel.
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. First of all, in general, I'm supportive of this, although certainly Mr. Jay and Mr. Maxwell and Mr. Alex have brought up pertinent points that need to be looked into. Before I continue, I want to mention I went out and talked to Mr. Shagnon after he left the room. You may have noticed I actually left before he left. And I waited for him. He tried to sneak out a door I wasn't expecting to go up. I did catch up to him. I don't think he was running away from me. But first of all, he truly is enthusiastic about PLAs with Unit 4. He thinks for Unit 4 they're a good thing. He said that again, and I didn't even ask him that. What I did ask him, though, was 2 questions. One was this $100,000 benchmark, which I think is too low, and he agreed totally. He says it's way too low. Now, he did not say how high it should be. He just said it's way too low. And the second thing I asked him was, do we really need to have this sort of covering all agreements? And he said no. It would suggest just for major projects. And then going on to the, that leads right into the memo from Barb Mann, the legal opinion. There's 2 sentences in there I think are important. One of them is, the ability to bind future boards is limited. That is, what we decide what we want to do can only extend to the end of our term, or the next board can say, we're going to do it differently. It could be one of either case. And the second sentence is, near the bottom is, and this may be more of her legal opinion, but I think it's pretty true. It is always best to negotiate such a contract in the context of an actual project so that the terms can fit our needs. And both Mr. Alex and Mr. Jay have alluded to that. So therefore, I think that maybe what we should do is put together a boilerplate PLA and then put restrictions on it, or actually, I guess it'd be clauses on it, like, for example, and I'm just throwing these numbers out there, under 500,000, contracts to $500,000, we don't have them. From $500,000 to $1 million, the board can decide, do we want to bring in a PLA? And over $1 million, it'd be automatic. We're going to have a PLA, or we can change those numbers to whatever we want. Because I think this is really important for major projects. I think for small projects, it's not that important. It's not going to do much for us. But in major projects, I think that's where it's a big deal. I think the U of I probably thinks that too, and clearly Unit 4 does that too. And so therefore, I think we should continue discussion and look at it from those viewpoints. Particularly, we can cover the problems, but we can make it best fit the project as we decide what we're going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weibel. Mr. McGuire, and then Ms. Petrie.
Thank you. I'm glad we have an opportunity to discuss this issue. I have a lot of questions about it also, the resolution, the numbers that have been discussed. Obviously, working for FNS at the University of Illinois, there's a lot of PLAs. It doesn't mean I necessarily get involved in PLAs all the time, but I understand from people that do that they work quite well. And they're an agreement between the contractors and labor and the university to work through the construction projects as they move forward. James knows that there was a strike on campus, lasted about 3 days, and the line of union was doing some construction, and the unions, including Mr. Ammons, was a little upset that some of the projects continued while they were happening. You know, I don't know that PLAs are perfect. There's some questions I have about them. There's some questions I have about this. I think that, like Pius says, that, you know, we talk back and forth. I think that's one of the problems the state has, that, you know, one side or the other looks at them, makes up their minds about whether they like something or they don't like something, and we don't have a lot of information about what really can go into PLAs. I'd like to know, you know, if we send something out for a bid, does that automatically mean that everybody on the job is going to be union if it's over $1 million? Are they restricted? What happens, and how do people bid for these jobs? I do want people that work on these jobs to understand what kind of work is going to be done. You know, I want qualified pipe fitters on the job. That does save us money. I know at the U of I, they do quite a bit of safety training. Do all these small contractors do that? Are they capable of doing this work? And when we're talking about a $32 million county jail, I think there's good small contractors. I think they do good small business or buildings in town, and they might do part of this job. Are they going to be part of bidding the county jail? Are they going to be part of building some part of? They might be, but do they have the resources to do that? Some businesses do can do parts of this. To say that we're going to impact them by having a PLA, and these PLAs are signed after the agreement, I think, or after the bid is done, we might impact them. I'm not so sure. We haven't in the past, if we've always paid prevailing rate. So I'd like more information. I'd like more information from the contractors that might be impacted by the PLAs. I'd like more information from Matt and, you know, how they actually work. I'd like you all to have more information about it so you can make decisions. I'd like to know how they would work through a process that we would use. If it'll help us, great. If it doesn't, if we don't think it will, if we need to change the numbers, let's do that. but it doesn't have to be something negative. We do have some big issues coming up. It sounds like the state wants to freeze our property taxes. At the same time, they want to send everybody back from the prisons, 25% of them. At the same time, we want to build the jail and fix the ADA problems. Nothing big, I mean, but I think that's a bigger issue why we're trying to fix 9% of our budget. So I'm glad we're discussing the issue rather than not. Thank you.
Ms. Petrie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm hoping that there will be a favorable vote for Mr. Weibel's motion to defer this for a month, because it seems to me very clear that we all need to ask more questions and do a bit more studying. And a couple of things that I would like to learn more about. We did hear from Mr. Blue, our highway engineer, but I would like to hear a bit more from both our county administrator and our facilities coordinator as to how they see this in relationship to their roles and their jobs, and they might have some input and advice as to the threshold amounts. Maybe Mr. Weibel has a good suggestion in that it's stair-stepped. It might be very useful for the Facilities Committee, which is wrestling with all of these big issues which the PLA would apply to for them to get some input to bring back to the Committee of the Whole. This is a policy decision, I understand, but it does play into our facilities, and we have a lot of them on the table. Referring to Ms. Mann's memo to all of us, she does wonder about, let me read it. She's concerned that by signing this contract, we would become party to any lawsuit between the union and the contractor. That's something that we need a bit more information about. She also underlines a bit of what has been alluded to, and that is her second concern is that adopting a resolution preferring unions might be used as evidence of discrimination against minorities and women. So those are some other aspects that we need some more conversation over. And then I've been doing a lot of research on this to educate myself about PLAs and prevailing wages. And one document that might be worthwhile for all of you to look at, and I'll be happy to share the URL, is the PLA document that Berkeley, the city of Berkeley, uses. It has many interesting aspects to it, so many that are not in the present document that we're looking at. And some of those aspects cover some of the issues that I've heard mentioned tonight, and I've heard from the Black Chamber of Commerce when I had communication with them to get their input. So I urge you all to consider deferring this for another month so we do have more time to have all of these conversations so we can get ideas and opinions on both sides of the argument. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Mr. Shore.
I just wanted to say that I'm generally supportive of this measure, although I do share some concerns about the threshold at which this would kick in, as well as the issues of minority representation that have already been thoroughly addressed. I did want to briefly circle back to Mr. Maxwell's comment about how we grow our economy and how we grow the pie. And I think there's a strong case to be made that demand does drive economic growth, and thus unions, through collective bargaining of wages, therefore drive economic growth. Any one of us who's taken an economics class has learned about the marginal propensity to spend, which is that those of us who have less in our pocket will put more of their next dollar back into our economy instead of saving it. And so that'll help with our local economy, and we can see that there's a high level of correlation both historically and across the nation between union participation and middle-class share of economic benefits. So, I think that anything we can do to help strengthen local unions would be beneficial to our economy in terms of regional economic development.
All right, Mr. Hartke, I haven't spoken yet, so I'm going to speak, and then I'm going to let you be the first person to speak a second time, which is a little bit amazing to me that, first of all, I want to thank you all for your engagement in this discussion. I'm hearing a lot of information that I don't think I would have otherwise heard if we had not had the discussion, and I appreciate it. I know not everybody was interested in doing that, but it's been very helpful for me to help think about a way forward and what we need to do. One of the things I would like to say is my feeling is why we don't have to hurry with this, why we can take it slow, Mr. Carter, is because we frankly don't have any money to spend on projects like this right now. And so the level, that the time that it's going to become relevant is not next month, and maybe not for several months, and maybe not a little longer. So I don't think we're hurting ourselves in being reflective and turning some of these things over and addressing them. I guess I want to say I'm +1 on raising the level. I think there's some really good relevance there. I think we should consider that. I'm really struggling with my concern for contractors that are minority owned and owned by women, because one of the ways that people have been able to improve their participation in public projects is by breaking them into smaller pieces rather than rolling them up into bigger chunks, because they can hope to bite off those pieces and do them themselves. I believe that's stuff that I got from Patsy in an email several months ago. I do read those things occasionally, Patsy. I know I don't read them all, but I really, and I was thinking of it in terms of small contractors owned by women and minorities, but something that I've heard tonight, and I'm sure Matt will go back and think about, is the what are we hoping to achieve when we say we want minority participation to improve, and what's that look like? And I trust Matt is thinking about that and probably has the answers already that I haven't heard yet. But I think we need to think about that too, because in something like this, we have an opportunity to get that kind of feedback. And Mr. Maxwell is dead on. We could have a project next month that might line up with needing something like this, and we could do it without a resolution. We could do that. We could choose to do that. But all of the things in that agreement would be subject to the terms that fit that project. If the hours had to be different because it was in the courthouse, that would be something we would address at that point. So we don't currently have a barrier to pursuing this if the opportunity presents itself. But I think we want to have, I like Mr. Weibel's comments there. I think we want to have the board to have a really good idea of when does this happen, and when do we need it, and when do we feel like it's justified. So I will commit to doing some more work in the next month to develop this. I know Shane has been writing down a ton of notes, so I know she's going to go back to the drawing board and try to find some things to help people understand. I'm sure she'd be glad to sit down, Mr. Kibler, I'm sure she'd be glad to sit down with you and give you that tutorial that you want. So that's the 2 cents I wanted to put in. And Mr. Hartke, if you really want to start the second round, it's up to you now.
Well, I want to make a comment to, one, I like that Sam actually, as an econ bachelor's degree, I like that Sam mentioned econ. I was econ. He also neglected to mention aggregate demand, which is important there. But what I've heard from people that their problems are that are negotiable are work hours, minority hiring, and the entry threshold of this. From previous conversations on this with Matt and other people in this, I know those are absolutely all negotiable points that we can find a middle ground on, find a better position on that can make more people comfortable. So I'm more than happy to vote to defer this till next month so we can spend time to negotiate this and get everybody on board.
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. I've been quiet. It hurts. I'll be brief. I don't see the necessity of this. I think you just explained it well, that we can create this if we need to, project specific. So why all the dancing and the show? For who? Why all the staff work? Why all the effort until we need it? If we need to write down a basic policy of how we might implement it and get a sample, then I guess we could do that and help a future board if we never get to use it. But why otherwise? Thank you.
Mr. Kibler.
So I'd like to add to Mr. Harkey's list of things we've got to address. It's the other piece of the other 60% that need to also be considered. Even if we did implement a policy of greater than X is automatically a PLA, that's still going to take out a sizable chunk of the potential workforce that could use it. Even though everybody would be paid the same, you are now giving bias to one group over the other. We need to justify to that individual why it is that they need to be part of this PLA in order to work for, I about said my company's name, but be able to work for Champaign County as we build. So keep that in mind too. That is probably the biggest thing that I have to wrap my head around.
All right, and before I call a vote on the deferral, I will also add to the list between Mr. Hartke and Mr. Kibler, Barb Mann's additional research that I'm going to ask for and encourage, and hopefully I can have a discussion with her about some of these things, because I really, I trust her advice, but I need to straighten some things out. And hopefully in the not-too-distant future, we have some money and a project to do that this will actually be relevant. And Mr. Anderson, I know you joined us in December, but one of the reasons why I like to see this happen is because when we do need it, now we won't have to spend that evening session orienting people to what we're talking about. It might have been better done in a study session, so some people could have chosen not to attend, I don't know. But now we've all heard about it. We may not, some of us may still not like it, but we're in a place where we can have that discussion and not have it, I hear this complaint many times, dropped in our lap. Sometimes the best time to have the discussion is when it's not falling into our lap. So that's my why, anyway. All right, so one more, Mr. Carter? I was going to call a vote.
And I should have had my vote now.
Yeah, I know, you sit next to Mr. Maxwell, you guys were in cahoots. All right, can I call the vote? All right, all those, this is the vote to defer. Does anybody need it to be a roll call? It's going to pass. You know that, right? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Nay. The motion passed, so it will be deferred to June. And that's I wish I had a gavel tonight, Patsy. I could really use I could have used a gavel. So the last thing I have to do before Mr. Alex runs us through a lightning fast finance committee of the whole, is say that all of the things in A are on consent, and C 2 and 3 are on consent, and that's it. And thank you all, really, thank you all for your engagement. Chris says this is going to be quick, so I'm not going to suggest a recess.
Well, let's have a 5-minute recess. We'll be back at 5 minutes to 9. I see too many people leaving the room. Okay, the meeting is called back in order at 5 minutes to 9. Roll call, please.
Esri,
Here.
Harper,
Here.
Harrison, Hartke,
Are we taking roll? Okay, present, sorry.
Jay, Kibler,
Present.
Maxwell, McGuire, Michaels, Quisenberry, Rosales, Schrader, Shore, Weibel, Alex,
Here.
Anderson, Bergson, Carter, Cowart, and Petrie.
Present. Thank you very much. Just to lighten the evening, I have a text message from Max Mitchell. Good debate on the Legit doc. Paying attention from DC. All right, so he's been acknowledged even though he's not here. Mr. Alex, would you handle the finance?
Okay, we'll start with the treasurer's report. Are there any questions or comments with regard to the treasurer's report? If there are none, I will have that accepted and placed on file. We don't really need a motion, we'll just do it. I see that we already dealt with the auditor. We will talk about the nursing home report. Again, without objection, I will receive that and place that on file. Any questions or comments on the nursing home report? Mr. Quisenberry.
I would just like to express happiness that the payer mix has shown an increase in private pay.
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. Do we have any other comments or questions on the nursing home? Any comments from our nursing home board members? Okay, seeing none, we'll accept that report, place it on file, move on to budget amendments and transfers. May I have a motion to forward budget amendment 15-21, pass-through of $3,747 for a disaster planning grant for the Emergency Management Agency. Moved by Mr. Esri, seconded by Mr. Kibler. Questions or comments, discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion carries. Budget Amendment 15-22, increased appropriations of $1,615 from the fund balance to achieve a 5% of the public safety sales tax revenue funding for the Youth Assessment Center. May I have a motion to send this to the full board? Mr. Shore, second. Ms. Cowart. Any discussion? Mr. Kibler.
So if this was an adjustment to be equal to the exact revenue that was brought in, why would increased revenue not also equate to 1615? Why is it from fund balance? Okay, so it is an increase in revenue of 1615.
No, it's not a mistake. Actually, this is a correction we have to do every year. The revenue was received last year in 2014. And we appropriate 5% of the prior year's revenue. So when we prepare the budget, it's an estimate. And it has to be corrected before the actual grant award is given. So this information, because this grant award still belongs to the Mental Health Board, this information has been provided to the Mental Health Board this year, that the grant award for the $0.25 that they do pursuant to the MOU needs to be in this amount for the July 1st award.
So it means we're spending $1,600 more of public safety sales tax money than we thought we were going to. Does that answer the question? Because the revenues were up in the previous year, and it's pegged based on the previous year. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 15-23, $16,000 pass-through for an IDOT contract for rural mass transit in Champaign County. May I have a motion? Moved by, I'm sorry, I didn't see who made it, Mr. Harper. Seconded by Mr. Esri. Is that right? He did now. Any discussion?
Ms. Bergson got left out.
Oh, sorry. We'll get you next time. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 15-24, $18,500 in pass-through for a HUD grant, providing medium-term rent assistance to families progressing on a plan towards self-sufficiency to the Regional Planning Commission. May I have a motion? Ms. Court, and may I have a second? And Ms. Bergson, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 15-25, $50,000 in pass-through funding to the Regional Planning Commission for the Shelter Care Plus program, even years. May I have a motion? Mr. Anderson and Mr. Kibler. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 15-26, $40,000 in pass-through to the Regional Planning Commission to provide human resource and payroll process for the Urbana Summer Youth Program. May I have a motion? Ms. Coward again, and Mr. Shore this time. Any discussion? Ms. Michaels.
Very quickly, I see that this will support the Urbana Summer Youth Program, and I'm happy to see that. However, access is money for the full county, and I'd like to make sure that all county children are able to receive some funding for summer programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. I'll pass that comment along to the Mental Health Board. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. That concludes budget amendments. We will move on to our very patient coroner. Mr. Northrup, take it away, sir.
Thank you. I almost lost track of why I was here tonight, but actually, you've got the document titled Coroner Report to County Board. This was something that was requested last month. Deb contacted me and said some of the members from the policy committee had requested me provide some numbers based off of what was going on with the death certificates. So I compiled those. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do the March 31st numbers because I basically have to run these numbers on the last day of the month or the first day of the month, and I was requested on the 9th of April, so I didn't have the numbers because they fluctuate every day, so I couldn't actually tell you. So at the end of April, I ran the numbers of the death certificates that we had out, and I altered the chart a little bit to coincide with how we were tracking it. Rather than greater, I put less than the amount of days, which coincides with a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and over, so that you could see just how many death certificates were outstanding at the end of April. And when I say outstanding, those are pending. That's because they're actual open investigations for any number of reasons. Each death certificate has a different reason, usually why it's still open. But what I can tell you is as of the end of last year, we were at or just above 100 pending death certificates a month, pretty steady. So we've already reduced that by 50% just since the first of the year, and I know that just because I happen to be running the numbers at that month for a certain reason and remember that. So that's a plus. What I also added is underneath the April column, I have down there pending cases and total investigations added each month. I threw that number in because I thought it would be important to show at the end of April, during the month of April only, we had just at 140 new deaths that came through our office just in the month of April. These ones that are in the column that are pending, some of those go back, as you can see, the amount of months or days they go back. But we also added 140 investigations that came into the office, and of those 140, there were 20 that became pending during that month as well. So actually 20 of the 50 are cases that came in sometime during the month of April and are still pending. So some of those will carry over into next month. Some have already been closed out this month. So that's just to give you an idea. That's why that number fluctuates, and I have to pull those numbers at the end of the month every month or the first day of the month before we close anything else out so I can give those to you. The other important thing I wanted to stress, though, is this kind of came about because there were some questions from some public members who were waiting on death certificates and calls about why they couldn't get death certificates. And I wanted to stress, every one of these pending death certificates, there's actually a death certificate that's filed. The law says we have to file a death certificate within 7 days after somebody dies, regardless of the circumstances. So I file a death certificate that's actually called a pending death certificate. The only difference between a pending death certificate and the final death certificate is the 3 lines or 4 lines in the center of the death certificate that say the cause of death says pending investigation instead of the actual cause. Everything else on the death certificate is the same, and it's filed within 7 days after the person dies. And that's the document that actually certifies that person died on a certain date at a certain time. It's a legal document. The person can get certified copies of it from the county clerk's office or from the public health department. It can be used for nearly everything except for some life insurance companies have policies that they will not pay out unless they have the final death certificate. One of the reasons is if a death is suspected of being a suicide and there's a clause in there that they won't pay out if it's a suicide, they want to see what the final outcome is. But unfortunately, sometimes we have some banks that are telling families they won't accept a temporary, and when the family calls us, we say, you need to call them back and tell them there's no reason they need the cause of death. If you're closing out a family's account or something like that, if you're the next of kin or the executor or whatever, all you need is that temporary death certificate. So I wanted to throw that in as well because every death that we handle is signed out within 7 days, at least on a temporary, if not on the final. So that was just to clarify that. And just to clarify some of the reasons, in case anybody's wondering why death certificates are pending and why some take longer than others. Some of it's a cost issue as far as like when we do an autopsy, we can't do everything on every case, like every toxicology that exists. It's impossible. So we do what's basic when we order a toxicology. We order a certain thing, it costs a certain amount of money. We may not do histology, which is taking tissue samples and having them made into microscopic slides to be looked at under a microscope. We wait for the toxicology to get back because we suspect there may be something in the tox that contributed to the death. That can take 2, 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on what all is in the toxicology. The more things that are in there, the longer it occasionally takes. But once we get that back, if we get it back and there's nothing or there's not what we expected in there that would relate to a cause of death, then we end up having to decide whether we do histology or do we do other testing, which just adds several weeks onto there. Because unfortunately, death investigation and autopsies are not a 100% every time this is what it is, you do this and this is what you find out. It's based off of what we find as we go, and that causes us to extend the cases. Sometimes it's not clear cut. A person can have a head bleed, if you've heard of an intracerebral hemorrhage or an intracranial hemorrhage, that can be caused from natural or traumatic. It can be caused from a person who's on certain illegal drugs, can cause their blood pressure to spike and cause a head bleed. When we get information back from the hospital, they say the person had a head bleed. They don't say why. And the hospital toxins many times won't catch or confirm the tests that we're running. So then we have to order or try and subpoena their tox samples from the hospital, send them in. Head bleed can be caused by trauma. It can be just a spontaneous or a stroke. And it can be natural causes. And those are the outcomes and why things like that take a while for us to complete, because what appears natural on the surface may not be when we get all the results back. But we kind of have to take a systematic approach. So that just explains, that's just one way of explaining, why death certificates are pending and what can cause them to be certain time frames that are different from others. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll have numbers for you next month too, just so you can kind of see. Eventually, these numbers will plateau though, because as you can see, with 140 deaths coming in on average a month, and approximately a 20 or so, 30 that become pending, they're going to keep to fluctuate every month at some point where we kind of even out. Yes?
Question for Mr. Kibler.
So you're alluding to it right at the end there. When we look at this report, when should we worry? When should we not worry? I normally say what does success look like, but in this case, it's kind of a morbid question to ask. So in your case, when should we start worrying about your staffing levels and being able to support you? At what numbers do we need to be considering as a warning or some sort of yellow flag that appears?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I came to the board back last June when we were doing the budget saying, hey, I've noticed that there's a problem here, we don't have enough staff to keep up, and unfortunately, we didn't do anything about it at that time. I came back in November and said, I'm telling you, I can't, there's just physically no way to keep up with the caseload. We did add the fourth employee, that helped us cover the 24-hour shifts, and as I was pointing out, it does seem to be making a difference to help us get caught up with the backload and hopefully, or the backlog, and hopefully stay caught up. But really, until I see the numbers, I can't even tell you where we're going to float. I'm guessing that we're getting close, but just because there was 20 pendings that came in this month out of the 50 that are still pending, and we won't have all these. I can tell you that the 3 that are over 6 months, I can't comment specifically on those cases because at least 1 or 2 of them are possibly homicides, and we're waiting on other results and tests to come in from the state and federal lab. So that's why they're longer. One case was DNA. It's hard to sign out a case as a person being deceased when we don't know for sure who the person is. They were skeletal remains. So there's things like that. But on a general rule, we try to have as many of our cases. Well, I can tell you that there's one standard out there that's from the National Association of Medical Examiners. They put out a standard that's by them that says 90% of your cases should be completed within 90 days or less. So that's what I'm kind of basing our standard off of and going, okay, if we can keep 90% of our cases closed out in 90 days or left, we're meeting the only standard that I know that's out there, and that's what the National Association of Medical Examiners uses. And that's a self-imposed standard by them. It's not a state or federal guideline or standard. It's just something that they impose themselves, and we try and stay within that as well, since it's the only standard that we're aware of.
Answer your question. Anybody else? Mr. Quisenberry.
Yeah, so quick question. You said that 3 had special circumstances that are longer than 6 months. What's the oldest one of those? How old's the oldest one?
Actually, one of those is 2013.
Is that
all the rest were last
the DNA
year.
one?
Yes. Well, it's DNA and something else. The DNA has come back, but that's a case that I really can't comment any more than it's potentially homicide. Yeah. But that's all the rest of the numbers in that column are all 2014.
And I assume these numbers come out of a specific piece of software that you guys to do your job?
It's actually the state of Illinois, Department of Public Health, has an online death certificate program that we put the death certificates on, and when we sign them out, they're on there.
So we don't have a vendor that we can complain to that
right. Well,
say, I can't run this for
whatever
April
vendor they use.
1st yeah, okay.
The system sometimes can be clunky, but we get by.
Well, thank you for providing this and the explanation of why the first column is all asterisks.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing for me tonight was this explanation of the temporary death certificates, because we have all these sort of apocryphal stories about, my grandmother died and it took me 3 months to get the death certificate. What it sounds like is really, for all intents and purposes, you should be able to get a death certificate within 7 days. Because it would seem that to sell a piece of real estate or to, begin processing, an estate, I mean, not to be flippant, but all you really need to know is that they're dead, right? I mean,
right.
The cause of death is not significant in the real estate
people.
Industry.
We've told them before, we said that person actually doesn't need to know and doesn't even really have a legitimate reason to know what the cause of death is. And actually, it's a state guideline or federal, I'm not sure which, but if you die from HIV or AIDS, that's actually blacked out of the certificate, so you can't even see it. So I don't know, and so we try and explain that to people that they really don't need that cause of death. Everything else, it's legal, it's a certified copy, and those are all signed out usually within 7 days. The only exception would be if we don't know who the person is.
Okay, well, that's something that's probably useful information for board members to have if we get calls from constituents who say, why can't I get a death certificate? Encourage them to see whether they really need the final death certificate or whether they can use this provisional one.
The biggest culprit is life insurance companies. I don't know if there's any people in here that sell life insurance for a living, but life insurance companies impose their own guidelines, and we have no control. If they came and said you have to have it within 30 days, we can't control that. And I've even had discussions. Sometimes life insurance companies have accidental policies, and I've had discussions with the life insurance companies, and they will pay out sometimes. Mainly, they just want to make sure that the beneficiary is not the suspect in a homicide or that it's not a suicide. And we have had them call us, and they've paid out after all. Some do, some don't.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Petrie.
I too appreciate that information about the death certificate, because I too have gotten calls from residents of the county. But to take that one step further, would it be terribly difficult for you to put that information on your website and a link to what you just mentioned to us?
We actually are looking at that, and I had discussed
Okay,
with Deb. I'm going to be
thanks.
working with IT to actually update our portion of the website, hopefully, so that we can put things like that out there. Great.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, we will accept your report, place it on file, and look forward to seeing it next month.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item F1. This is a request from the county clerk asking for the acceptance of agreement between Champaign County and the Illinois State Board of Elections for a voter registration state grant. May I have a
I move
motion?
approval.
Moved by Mr. Quisenberry, seconded by Mr. Kibler. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. On to G1, Sheriff requesting approval of the intergovernmental agreement for the area-wide records management system, ARMS. May I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Anderson and seconded by Mr. Esri. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. And the state's attorney's request, requesting approval of renewal of the intergovernmental agreement between the Illinois Department of Health Care and Family Services and the Champaign County State's Attorney for Child Support Enforcement. May I have a motion? Mr. Weibel and Mr. Anderson. Discussion? Mr. Maxwell.
Yes, perhaps Deb can help with this. Has the state of Illinois been forwarding payments for this program on a timely basis?
Yes.
Short and sweet. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. And we'll move on to the county administrator's report. Deb has the fiscal year 2015 general corporate fund budget projection and budget change reports.
The general corporate fund projection is very similar to what it was last month. We're behind on three major areas. We expect less on penalties on taxes, less on fees, and less on our 1 cent sales tax than what was originally budgeted. The quarter-cent sales tax shows coming in less, but I can tell you it's better than it was last month because our receipts for this month were 3%, a 3% increase, so that's a positive trend. Expenditures, largely the same. You'll note that on regular salaries and wages, it looks like we're going to overspend our budget. That never looks that way. There are two reasons for that. We have correctional officers changing over where they're going, so where we're going from them being paid out of SLEP to being regular employees. So that's causing an increase that hasn't been yet adjusted in the budget by the sheriff. And the other part of it, we had some retirements with benefit payouts early in the year, which also has had an impact. I would still be surprised if we actually overspend that budget by more than what the correctional officer's reconciliation of line items will result in as we get later into the fiscal year. So for this fiscal year 15, we are still anticipating about a $400,000 shortfall in revenue to expenditure. And you can see that our revenue projection is right at 34.7 million. And our budget projection is at 35 million. We need to get that budget down to match our revenues. And the budget change report is on the back page.
Any questions for the county administrator? Seeing none, we will accept those and place them on file and move on to the acceptance of the financial policies. I would entertain a motion to forward this to the full board with a recommendation for approval. Mr. Sam Shore and Mr. Kibler. Any discussion on this? Deb, would you like to discuss this? This is something we do every year.
The policy is not substantively changed. There are some corrections. We have a different number of special revenue funds than we did a year ago. The fiscal year change and just a couple of other minor edits so that this reflects accurately our current operations.
Thank you. I'm sorry, do we have a motion on this? Yeah. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. We'll move on to the fiscal year 2016 budget process resolution. May I have a motion to send this to the full board with a recommendation for approval? Ms. Michaels and Mr. Rosales. Some comments on this. This is very similar in terms of timeline to what we did last year. And the most significant change from last year is that we are asking departments to identify approximately 4% in spending reductions. As you're aware, we have declining fee revenue and relatively flat tax receipts. So we do not have as much money to spend as we believed that we would. So it's unfortunate. As you know, we significantly reduced our workforce for the last financial crisis in 2005. So we are sort of beyond the point of cutting waste at this point and actually asking departments to look at potentially cutting services. It may mean that positions will go unfilled. It may mean that that there will be staff reductions. So it's something we're all going to have to work through and try to identify ways in which we can work within our budget in a way that comes as close as possible to meeting the needs of the taxpayers. Deb.
Just a couple of things, too. This resolution requires the general corporate fund departments not only to present a budget with a 4% reduction, but to also provide you with a statement of what it would require for their optimal operation, so that you, as a board, are made aware of what the departments are not doing because they do not have the funding for it. This is different than what we've done in the past. In the past, we've told them to prepare requests for additional funding. We're not asking them to prepare requests for additional funding this year, but we do think it's important that the board is aware for each department what it isn't doing or what it's unable to do, so that you're aware of that information as you move forward. And the other thing is, different than what was done previously on the capital asset replacement fund, this resolution is basically directing me, the administrator, to present the capital asset replacement fund both as a fully funded, fully reserve funded program and for current funding only, so that, again, you can see the difference.
Thank you. I will make one more clarification before I go to Diane. I know there's been talk about the potential of state cuts, specifically the local government distributive funds, which is our share of the state income tax. At this point, this budget resolution assumes that that is not going to happen. If that, in fact, does happen, and it's certainly a possibility, then we would have to go to the departments and seek additional cuts. And we think the total impact of that might be on the order of another 4%.
Yeah, that's correct. And the other thing this doesn't assume is a freeze in property tax.
Right, which they were discussing as recently as this afternoon with a couple of resolutions in Springfield, one of which would set the PTEL inflationary increase to 0, and one which would set it to 0 and also apply it to home rule units. So it'll be a lot of fun over in Springfield tomorrow. Now, Diane.
Sorry, just real quickly, as they make their list, if they could prioritize those for us, because then we would have a better understanding of what is the most important that they're cutting out, if we ever have the ability to change some of those priorities.
Yeah, yes, I'm sure that we're still working on the format for how that information can be provided to you.
Did I see Pius, did you have your hand up earlier?
You answered my question, so
Okay,
never
sorry.
mind.
Then we'll go to James and then to Jim. If I'm missing anybody, holler out. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad to hear that we're looking at a 4% and an 8% possibility. I know a local municipality recently did planning and did not include any potential cuts from the state, and I don't want us to be in that position. I think we have to be prepared, like some of the other governmental agencies in this community have planned ahead and said, here's what we can do depending on what comes out of the fight in Springfield.
Thanks, James. Jim.
Okay, is the additional 4% the total loss of the distributive fund, or just half of it, or what do you?
That's a
What's your
50%.
guess?
That would be a 50% cut in the state shared revenue, would be 4% of our budget. We don't think they're going to completely eliminate it, although. Any other comments or questions on the budget process resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And our last item under finance is a request to release the request for proposal for vending services. May I have a motion to send this to the full board? Mr. Weibel and Mr. Oh, I'm sorry, this is released from this committee. So may I have a motion to approve this as a finance committee? Mr. Weibel and Mr. Esri. Deb, do you want to give a brief 2 sentences on this?
This recently came up, we missed it. The contract actually expired on April 1st, so we did a 90-day extension with the current vendor. They were happy to do that. And this RFP is very similar to what we did 4 years ago, the last time we did this release. We will be getting input from our department. We have already received input from some of our departments and employees and have tried to incorporate that. And we will use a process of evaluating, vendor offerings with a committee that will look at that to recommend eventually an award to you.
Thanks, Deb. Any questions on the vending RFP? And again, this is essentially primarily the soda machines in county buildings, right?
Right.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. That concludes finance. Items for consent are B3, D1 through 6, F1, G1, H1, and I 3 through 5. Thank you.
3 and 4.
Sorry, 3 and 4.
I just want to announce before Mr. Quisenberry reads the notice for the closed session that we will be adjourning from the closed session. Please read the announcement.
I move that we enter into executive session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2, parentheses C, close parentheses 1, to consider the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of Champaign County. I further move that the following individuals remain present, and that would be the recording secretary. Second.
Oh, yeah, second. Sure.
Roll call.
Esri? Yes. Harper? Yes. Harrison? Yes. Hartke?
Yes.
Jay?
Maybe. Yes.
Kibler?
Yes.
Maxwell?
Yes.
McGuire?
Yes.
Michaels?
Yes.
Petrie?
Yes.
Rosales?
Yes.
Schrader? Shore? Weibel? Quisenberry?
Yes, although with, never mind. Let's go.
Oh, I'm sorry.